Welcome to the Table Podcast, where we discuss issues of God and culture, brought to you by Dallas Theological Seminary.
Welcome to the Table, where we discuss issues of God and culture. I'm Darrell, Bock, Executive Director, Cultural Engagement at Dallas Theological Seminary and the Hendricks Center there. And my guest today is Eric Chabot, who works with Rash of Christy on the Ohio State University campus. It's the Ohio State University, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I went to the University of Texas, so when everybody's a the, then we got an issue. But anyway, it's a real pleasure to have you. Eric is involved with what is a new ministry, as well as having associations with another ministry out of Texas. So I'm going to let him talk about that combination and what he does on campus. So first, talk to us about Rash of Christy and what that organization is all about.
Okay, well, it's great to be here. Rash of Christy really means reason for Christ. That's what that ministry means. And around 2009, there was a gentleman down in North Carolina who saw the need to really start a ministry down there on a campus, basically with an apologetics focus. And really, Rash of Christy is a nationwide ministry. And so when this gentleman started that down in North Carolina in 2008 or 9. His name was Randy Hardman. He went on to do some grad work under Craig Keener. But we just basically, it kind of snowballed from there. We decided that campuses across the country needed more of a apologetics focus, and a lot of the atheist literature was coming out. We were seeing a lot of students being impacted by that. And so basically, Rash of Christy helps students be more equipped in their faith, to share their faith confidently, know what they believe, know why they believe it. And we are now up to over like 120 chapters nationwide, have some overseas too. So really just kind of snowballed from there. You know, once the one chapter was started down in North Carolina, and then I started the fourth chapter here at Ohio State, the Ohio State University.
There you go.
I get corrected all the time. In 2009. So we're definitely, a ministry has an apologetics focus, and that's what we do on the campus.
Now, North Carolina, was this North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where this started?
No, Randy started that chapter down in Boone. Yeah, that's where he was. And then we were associated a little bit with SES Seminary, Southern Evangelical Seminary. Mm-hmm. They're, of course, out of Charlotte, right. And they're very apologetics have an apologetics focus. So they kind of came on board and helped some other chapters start in North Carolina after that one. Now we have one at the campus you just mentioned there, the other North Carolina chapters or campuses.
Yeah, that small North Carolina school.
Right. It all started down there, down south, and we've kind of gone out from there.
So, how did students connect with you guys? And then what do you do in terms of ministry, in terms of your general approach?
Yeah, well, the one thing I tell people is that Rash of Christy, we're not just basic Bible studies. As you know, campuses have a lot of Bible studies. What we do is we have weekly meetings where we will tackle some of the big objections on the campus or in the culture, of course, such as God's existence or, you know, the reliability of the Bible or other topics. And then what we also do is that we bring in speakers. We will have apologetic speakers come to the campus and do lectures. We might do debates. I've had certain debates. I had Michael Brown debate Bar Ehrman. I've had Frank Turk twice to the campus. I've had William Lane Craig. I've had Mike Lacona. We've had a lot of speakers come in that really lecture on the top apologetic topics of our culture. So we try to keep an environment on the campus that is favorable to Christianity, and also show that Christianity can answer, you know, the questions of life, that, you know, has intellectual viability. And so then I personally also do a lot of evangelism on the campus, where I go out and talk to students, and I bring students with me from the Rash of Christy chapter, where we engage, you know, people on the campus and gets kind of their feet wet in that area.
So is this once a week that you guys meet, or that are scheduled to meet, or how does that work?
Yes, we have once a week meetings, and we're in a classroom. We rent out a classroom. We're a student organization. All the Rash of Christy chapters are actually student organizations, fully registered on the campus too, and then we can take advantage of the classrooms to meet in. So yes, we do meet once a week. Okay,
and then the other ministry that you're associated with, what is that?
Well, that's called CGF Ministries, and it was formerly called the Christian Jew Foundation, and that was started by Charles Hauff back in the late 60s. He was a Jewish person that came to faith in Jesus. And I have a strong background in reaching Jewish people for the faith, because I came to faith actually through hearing the gospel through a Jewish believer. Even though I'm not Jewish, I was raised in a Jewish community, and I knew a lot about Jewish people. So God seemed to always have my life, the calling of my life seems to always be centered around Jewish people. Now, at Ohio State is 5,000 Jewish people, and that's a pretty large amount.
Is that 10% of the total or thereabouts?
Right. Yeah. And so every time I've done outreach on the campus, we have always tried to have a focus on, reaching the Jewish community. As I said, I brought Michael in. I've had him do a lecture as well on Jesus's messiahship. So, we've done some outreach events there to reach out to the Jewish communities.
So that's Michael Brown, who we've had on the table, and who also just wrote the response to the Newsweek Bible article that was produced on Christmas 2014 that's just come out and has just been a part of a discussion about the nature of Scripture in the public square. And I take it that kind of discussion and those kinds of issues are precisely the kinds of things that you all interact with on a regular basis.
That's right. I mean, we are trying to tackle the cultural objections that are out there all the time, the misinformation on the internet, and a lot of things that people are picking up online and just everywhere. And as you know, it never ends. So we're constantly working in this area. So that's exactly what we do.
Yeah, and between Christmas and Easter, you're real busy, and then everybody takes a breath, and we go through the cycle again the next Christmas and the next Easter.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, okay, so let's talk about the kinds of issues that you all deal with. You mentioned a couple of them already. The existence of God. I suspect if you had Mike Lacona in, he's talking about some of the issues particularly tied to the Gospels in the New Testament. What are the issues that you regard as, well, I'll just go ahead and ask what was our first general question when we're talking about university campuses. What do you see as the largest intellectual challenges on the Ohio State campus?
I would say that the two most pressing issues, one of them has to do with a book you wrote called Truth Matters. Mm-hmm. And I am seeing just an overload of people on college campuses that don't seem to see what objective truth is, nor do they see it as relevant. And so when we're sharing the gospel with people on college campuses, the responses I'm getting are kind of like, well, I don't feel it's true, so I don't really think it matters. Or does it work for me? It doesn't work for me, so Christianity is not relevant, a very, what we call a pragmatic view of truth. Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing that everywhere I go. Now, I even had an atheist tell me once, he said, look, Eric, I don't care if Christianity is true. If this is a positive thing in your life, it makes a difference, then so be it. That's a good thing. See, he didn't even care if it was true. Uh-huh. So I'm seeing the issue of truth as an intellectual problem, and then also God's existence. I think what I see is that students do not know how to think about God. What I mean by that is they don't know how to approach the existence of God. For example, what method do I take to find God? Do I take an historical approach, where I look into history? Do I take an empirical approach? Do I take an experiential approach? Do I take a pragmatic approach? I mean, students just don't know how to think in that area, and so you're kind of always starting from scratch with them. And of course, the science thing, yes, that's still an issue. Students think science rules as far as it's the only way to know, have knowledge. That's obviously always out there. But I find generally that just a lot of students are not seeing the urgency of, why Christianity, if it's true, as I tell students, look, if Jesus rose 2,000 years ago, it's still true, even if you don't feel it right now, even if you don't think it's relevant, and I'm dealing a lot with the issue of objective truth, and then how do you approach the existence of God?
Yeah, the
most pressing issues.
The way I like to say it is that we've gone from a culture where the Bible is the answer to the Bible becoming part of the question. And of course, behind that is if you say the Bible is the Word of God, you've got to know that God exists in order for Him to speak. So,
right.
So you're starting kind of at ground zero. Here's an interesting element of this conversation, I think, because it's one of the ways in which the ancient world and the modern world differ to a significant degree. In the ancient world, the societies were very religious. There was a belief about gods and divine activity of one sort or another all around. And one can discuss what the Greco-Roman world is like, but still, the idea of there being a transcendent and transcendent forces to deal with was kind of a given. I like to tell audiences when I speak to them that the Greco-Roman calendar had 150 religious holidays every year, which is, I mean, that's one every 3 days. And I tell people, we ought to get that calendar. That would be a good deal. But the point is that there was a lot of religious activity, a lot of belief in religious activity, whereas in the modern world, you almost have to build your way there, because the starting point in Scripture, assuming that everyone shares some sense of there's something else out there, is the idea that there's a creator, at least the possibility of a creator, and we're creatures accountable to that creator. And we don't have anything quite like that operating for us today. We almost have to get there. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. It just seems like you almost have to start from ground zero with people anymore. And like I said, the biggest issue I'm dealing with these days is the issue of pragmatism. Mm-hmm. And that is a theory, put out by William James many years ago, that religion is true if it works for you, if it makes a difference in your life. That's kind of what makes it true. That's the test for truth. Now, that's kind of gone away from the classical view in Christianity that truth is what corresponds to reality.
Right.
Whereas you make a claim, and this is what corresponds to the actual world. Like if we say Jesus rose from the dead, this actually has to match up with reality. And so that's one of the biggest issues I see, is this issue of pragmatism. I think our culture is built on pragmatism, as you know. We get college degrees, we get a job that works for us, it makes us money. So pragmatism is really impacting the way people think. And if they don't see Christianity as making a difference, or it's relevant, or it works for them, they kind of just scrap it, in a lot of ways. And then you got to start from ground zero with them about going back to truth. So I agree with everything you're saying. You have to start from ground zero.
Yeah. Now, one of the tricky things I think about pragmatism, and one of the reasons I think pragmatism exists, is that in our history, dealing with religion and the issue of religion has always been a very controversial kind of subject. I mean, anyone who understands the Enlightenment project knows that the Enlightenment in part was a reaction to many of the religious wars that took place in Europe that devastated Europe for several centuries before we got to the Enlightenment. And so the advantage of pragmatism from a pragmatic point of view is, I say, well, if that works for you, that's great. I'm not going to put your religion down. I'm going to give you the room to live your life the way you want, but give me the freedom to live and enjoy the life that I have in the way that I can. And as long as we don't, create conflict for one another, then we're in great shape. And so it's almost it's not quite a hands-off approach, but almost a hands-off approach to religion. It's like a bazaar. You can choose to pick and use it if it works, but if not, if you bypass that particular helping in the cafeteria, then you're okay. That kind of the attitude that comes with this conversation.
Yeah, I think that part of the issue is, I think that students are looking around the world, seeing real serious problems in the world. As you know, we have a lot of problems, and I think they're saying, what solutions are out there for this? What can I grab onto that really might make a practical difference in this area? And so I think that's the first question they're asking. Does Christianity make a practical difference? Is this going to help me with my future? Is it going to help me get a job? Is this going to help me with a family? Is this going to help me here and there? And of course, we have this thinking in the church. It's in the church as well. A lot of Christians think this way as well. So I don't get me wrong. There's still a lot of modernism. I mean, I still see students that are very, kind of have the scientific mindset and everything has to be proven, empirically. There's still a lot of students like that. But I'm also seeing the pragmatism as well. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
So are you seeing the pragmatism as even though it emerged very early? I mean, William James, the beginning of the last century. Are you seeing pragmatism being wedded to the kind of the postmodern stepping back from the issue of truth, and those two working in combination?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, for example, I was on a panel last week. I did an interfaith panel. Someone asked me to do it, and that's the first one I ever did. And I was on it with a Buddhist rabbi and a Muslim, and then a Baha'i person, speaker. And, I listened to them speak. I was the last person up, giving the Christian view on peace in the world. And I noticed that none of them talked about truth. None of them talked about our differences, that we, believe in different things. And it came across me listening to them that I think they all kind of viewed religion more in a pragmatic kind of practical way. And that's how we can all get along in the world, right? If we just have a practical outcome of our faith. I was the only one that mentioned that, we have to admit the fact that we make different truth claims, but we can agree to disagree on some things, and it was kind of quiet in there. I noticed as I was saying this.
You had to look up truth in the dictionary.
Yeah, I felt like I was the oddball, but as the apologist organization on the campus, I felt like I needed to address it, and I felt like God gave me the platform, so I wasn't going to let it go by the wayside. And I was very kind with it. I was gentle, but I just had to bring it up. So, yeah, I think pragmatism has just come out of, I think what I see is the issues of the world today, and people are seeing a lot of problems. And they're trying to figure out what difference does our faith make in these issues. That's why the social justice movement, is very big. People like to latch on to, those kinds of things as well. Yeah.
So where does that leave you in terms of? You're trying to introduce students to truth. How do you get over the hurdle of the pragmatism?
Well, this is probably what goes on in 90% of my conversations. After I've explained the gospel or answered some of their objections, I generally find myself saying this almost every time. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a student. Now listen, Darrell, what if Christianity is really true? Would you agree with me if this is really true, this impacts your life now? Like if Jesus came into this world 2,000 years ago and he rose from the dead, and this actually happened in time, space, and history, would you not agree that this would make a difference in your life right now if it's really true, right? So I get them to think about truth. I get them to admit to me, yeah, this matters. If it's really true, it's true. And they actually most of the time will admit to me, you know what, this could be true and I really need to think about this. So I don't let them off the hook. I just try to bring them back around always to bring them to the urgency of the question, whether it's really true. If this is true, this does impact your life. And get to admit, yes, it does matter if it's true. Now, they may say, I'm not sure if it's true, but I have to admit the fact that this very well could be true. Yeah. So that's what I find myself doing most of my conversations, almost all the time.
So it's really getting them to grapple with the nature of the claim that's being made on their lives by God in many ways. Right. And coming to grips with that if a God exists, if you are the creature, he's the creator, and he's designed you for a relationship with him, then probably checking in is not a bad idea.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that helps. What about issues? What about tone? We've gone through a period of a lot of battles and culture wars, and there certainly are differences of opinion when you're talking about truth. So, how do you guys handle tone, and what do you tell your students about tone as you engage?
Oh, well, I tell them that I think kind of like the apologetics text, everybody uses the 1 Peter 3:15, 16. Of course, they take it out of context most of the time. But, it does talk about, giving a reason for the hope that is in you with gentleness and reverence, and and respect. Mm-hmm. So I try to tell them that the hallmark of doing Christian apologetics is one of you need to be humble. You can be truthful, but also you need to be humble. You need to have the right attitude. And our tone needs to be one of humility. That we don't want to come across as we obviously don't want to be arrogant, but we can still speak the forward truth with love and just be gentle. So that's kind of the text I really try to hammer home with them. You want to be gentle with people. People are very sensitive these days. It seems to be more and more. Mm-hmm. You say the wrong thing, they get awfully mad. So I just tell them tone needs to be humble and gracious, and let your speech be seasoned with grace and salt. And so it's a work in progress. About how we handle it.
Another practical question that comes out of this relates to the tone issue is that sometimes what happens, of course, when you discuss the truth and you have a difference of opinion is you can get locked into a debate. Okay. Right. And then the goal becomes to win the debate. But what I'm sensing from you just talking about this is that what your goal is really to get them to have a conversation, to get them to reflect on where they are and kind of draw them into the issues as opposed to being mostly confrontive. Is that a fair distinction to make?
Yes, I would say the goal is always to have a conversation. And what I'm noticing more and more on campuses and students at Ohio State is that today's college campuses, you have to work generally a job, maybe a couple internships, you're going to school full time. These students are so busy, so busy. And I'm trying to get them to slow down for 10 minutes and reflect on the issue of God and how that impacts their life. So yes, it is a goal of conversation. Now, the goal is a conversation, but I will say my experience shows me that over time, if you're talking to a person, then they start asking questions, it can get a little confrontational sometimes if if it starts going on and on for an hour or more and they have a lot of objections. I don't mean confrontational necessarily in a negative way. I mean just that they may just have some really good objections, and you start going back and forth. Before you know it, if someone's listening in, this kind of sounds like a debate. No, I didn't want to turn it into a debate, but sometimes it just may go in that direction. But I've never had anybody that's been, where it's been like a terrible situation. It's just I call it a friendly debate.
Yeah, that you're in disagreement and you're trying to sort it out, or that there's a difference of opinion, or that there are questions being raised that need to be sorted through.
Right, exactly. And so my goal when I talk to people, and I tell students, the goal is to obviously share the gospel, try to answer their objections to the best of their ability, remove any obstacles you can to prevent them from coming to the gospel. And if you've done that to the best of your ability in the presence of God, then you've done your part, and that's all you can do. You leave the results to the Lord.
So pragmatism and it's an interesting mix. Pragmatism on the one hand and wrestling whether there is truth, and then this kind of scientific thing floating underneath. Those are the two large challenges. Do you have any? Many campuses have what are called faith buster classes or things like that. Where there are specific classes on campus that really do go after Christianity pretty hard and have a reputation for doing so. Do you have anything like that at Ohio State?
I don't think we have any faith buster classes. I mean, we have the atheist organization here, of course. They're always around, and we've had interaction with them over the years. They're a little quiet right now, but we did a couple student debates with them a few years back. But I don't think we have any faith busters classes. I would say the antagonism or obstacles of Christianity on the campus come in the biology classes, where professors are openly putting down, theories like intelligent design, or, of course they say creationism. That's another topic that happens a lot. But I don't really, can't think of anything else. Now, I'll tell you this: the New Testament early Christianity class they teach here, they use Bart Ehrman's book on Introduction to Christianity, and I've had two students that come to my meetings because they're in that class and they don't know how to answer those things, and they've been showing up at our meetings.
Yeah.
So that's been an issue. But I don't know any faith buster classes. I would say the obstacles more come from the atheist group if they want to do something like they have like a lecture. I've been to 2 Jesus myth or lectures. They try to say Jesus didn't exist. Those kinds of things are on the campus, more or less. So
the campus sounds like it's more like an open bazaar of ideas as opposed to being particularly a hostile environment per se.
I would say it's a mix. I would say that it is an open, it's a smorgasbord of beliefs. You have people from all different backgrounds, different religions. You have a lot of atheism. You have a lot of different religions. But I would say there's some opposition to Christianity, but I wouldn't say that it's just like, everywhere I go. But I mean, it's certainly out there. I mean, I've been, some people said some things to me over the years on the campus. I've been out a few negative things I can't repeat. So yeah, there's opposition, but I would say that it's mostly in different arenas, but it's not like ridiculous. Like every day I go out, someone's doing something to put down the Christian faith right in front of me.
Would it be fair to say that the opposition that comes to Christianity is part of the environment of just skepticism about religion in general, or is it Christianity specific in any way?
I think it's skepticism in general. I think with the impact of postmodernism and just skepticism, I think a lot of people and cynicism, by the way, cynicism as well. I think a lot of people just don't know how to think about God, and they're generally skeptical of knowing anything with any kind of certainty. And then the issue of God is the problem because, you can't see God directly. And so they assume if you can't see God directly, it's blind faith. And then you got to go through the whole issue of, clarifying what it means to say God exists. And you have to come up with a method of approaching God's existence. So I think the number one issue is people don't know how to think about God. And that's something that churches haven't done a great job in equipping Christians on as they go into the campus, and then the culture in general. What class do you go to on a college campus that teaches you how to think about God other than maybe philosophy of religion? That's maybe about it if you take a class on that. Otherwise, it's just there's nothing there for students to take, and they just don't know how to approach it.
And as you say, churches don't really help students get there either. So you're kind of they walk into these conversations very ill-equipped to have them in many ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you guys exist to kind of plug that gap.
Yeah, exactly. I found about 2009 was when the atheist literature was getting more prominent, around some of the time those writings are coming out. Now it's kind of maybe died down a little bit. I don't, it's still out there, but not as much as it was the height of, the culture. It was all over the place about 2008, 2009. And I was seeing a lot of students reading that stuff. The president of the atheist group at that time became an atheist because he read Richard Dawkins' book on the God delusion. He was raised Christian and he left the faith over that. I saw other students, becoming skeptics or atheists by reading those works. So that's why a lot of us are like, we need something on a campus. We need a presence to deal with this stuff. And I've noticed that probably I've been on the campus for 10 years. A lot of the objections are still the same every year, same kind of objections over and over. But I would say that I just see a lot of students that don't know of an outlet, a place they can go to get their objections dealt with. They need to know that there is a place, and that's what we try to do.
Well, without giving the house away, so someone comes to you and you're trying to push them to deal with the existence of God. How do you build that bridge? What kinds of things are you saying to them?
Well, if they come to me, the first question is I ask, are they really seeking? I ask them, do you care if God exists? Is this something that you're thinking about? Is this something that impacts you? Or is this something you're kind of like just apathetic about? Some people are like, well, maybe God exists, maybe he doesn't. I don't care, I'm busy. But if they are truly seeking, then I start to talk to them about, how do we approach the existence of God? And then here's what I say. Look, if God exists, would it make sense that he would speak somewhere in history, somewhere to reveal himself to humanity, that he would want to show up and show what he has for us? And then that builds a bridge to talk about Christ, to talk about the resurrection, talk about the work of Jesus. I create a plausibility factor with them. Mm-hmm. And then I talk about the world of nature. I say, look, do you think that God has revealed himself maybe in the natural world and some of the features we see in the biological realm, like our DNA or, the information code in our systems, or I just try to get them to think about how we approach the existence of God. But ultimately, my best argument apologetically is a historical thing. I try to get them to the person of Christ, to consider that as a plausible, and ultimately that's the best argument. I'm trying to get them to, to reach that place, because ultimately I got to get them to there. That's the goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's an interesting challenge to get people to think about the way in which really our world is ordered, right, and seems to have structure, seems to make sense. It doesn't, there's a regularness to existence that is pretty stable in many ways, and it doesn't look like it could just happen by accident.
Right. Well, my friend Frank Turk has a new book out, which it's called "How Atheism Borrows from God." I think that's called. It's called "How Atheism Has to Borrow from God." And one of the things I tell students is that you have features of reality all around you that you see every day, you take for granted. And then I say, what explains this better? Christianity or theism or atheism? We're rational beings, right? We're able to make inferences. We have the laws of logic. We have moral obligations every day, that we take for granted. We're morally obligated to treat people certain ways or do this or do that. We have the law of causality that impacts science. We just have features of reality every day all around us you take for granted. Then I ask them what makes sense of that and whether atheism can account for those things or no God. Does it make more sense? There's a God that's built these things into reality. That's the approach Frank's kind of taking in his book. And that's the approach I kind of take with students as well, just to get them to think about that.
Well, tell people a little bit about Frank, because these are good resources that you're mentioning.
Yeah. Frank Turk has written a book called "I Don't Have Faith to Be an Atheist" with Norm Geisler. It came out several years ago. He's just written a new book called "How Atheists Steal from God." It's called "Stealing from God." I think that's the exact title of the book. It just came out last month. And I've had him, Frank, to the campus a couple times. And I've noticed that when I promote an event called "I Don't Have Faith to Be an Atheist," oh my goodness, does that draw up a lot of interest on a college campus. Yeah, it's so fun to promote that event. I didn't come up with the title. Of course, Frank and Norm did, but I think it's a fantastic title for an event because whenever I go out with the posters or the flyers, students automatically come up to me and they're like, wait a minute, what? I don't get it. What do you mean? I don't have faith. I'm an atheist. You have faith. And it just kind of draws them in. And we've generally had pretty good turnouts for both of those events. Now, Frank, of course, has been doing that presentation over and over on campuses for years. Now he's going to be, promoting this new book. So it's a really good resource. I think it's a very good introduction just to think about Christianity. It's not advanced, but it's just a good intro, I think, for students to read.
Now, what's Frank's ministry? Where does he serve?
He's at crossexamine.org. If you go to his website, it's called Cross-Examine, and you can find all his resources on there. Like I said, we also had Dr. William Lane Craig come. He did a lecture on the existence of God. He gave 7 reasons for the existence of God. That was pretty interesting. I got to see, we had a pretty good turnout for that. We had about 600-700 people. Then we had, of course, like I said, we have Mike Lacona, who lectured on the resurrection of Jesus. That's his specialty. You go to risenjesus.org. So, we're trying to put ideas out there, things that students can come and hear. This is the way I tell people, this may be their only opportunity out of the 4 years they're on a college campus to hear a presentation on the truthfulness of the Christian claim. This may be it. Out of their entire 4 years, they'll ever hear something. And it may stay with them for the rest of their life. And so that's the way I look at it as far as when you have a speaker come in and do something like that. That's the importance of it.
Now, just so people can know who people are, William Lane Craig teaches out at Talbot Biola. He's been doing philosophy, religion, and historiographical work and apologetics for a long time, has a philosophy and New Testament background. Mike Lacona is at Houston Baptist and does the same kinds of things for them. Both have written extensively, a variety of works that walk into various of these areas. So if we're thinking about resources that parents or church leaders can get their hands around, those are 3 very good names for resources, correct?
Yes, I think those are good they all have introductory works you can get online. Just go to their websites. Dr. Craig's website's reasonablefaith.org. You can go to Amazon, look at his books. Of course, Mike's books are on Amazon as well on his website. I also think that as far as introductory works, I think, obviously Lee Strobel's stuff is a good introductory. All his books, Lee Strobel wrote The Case for Christ, The Case for Creator, The Case for Faith, Case for the Real Jesus. So I think those are all good resources. He has DVDs. Go to Lee Strobel's websites. The thing I'm encouraged about is the church has more than enough resources today to take hold of. You've put out works as well. Some of the stuff you've done on the historical Jesus, some of those works are all excellent. So the way I see it is there's more than enough material out there. It's just the fact that Christians just need to get a hold of it and, try to absorb it, and work with the material we are putting out there for the church. So I'm encouraged by what we got.
Thanks for listening to the Table Podcast. For more podcasts like this one, visit dts.edu/thetable. Join us next week for part 2. Dallas Theological Seminary. Teach truth, love well.